Hello everyone and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andrew Bentley, and here on the Commander's Forge, it's an area for me to talk about magic and Commander in the ways that I enjoy it. Now today, I want to start off with a talk about setting up a game. That conversation at the beginning that should kind of give you an idea of what kind of game you're looking to play. Because something I've noticed, particularly in the Guardian Project Discord, is instead of trying to give an arbitrary number, we'll say, hey, this is the deck I'm going to play, and this is what it's trying to do. And I'll give you a couple different examples of that. So, things like my Goreclaw deck, which I would only say is like a high 7, and if it goes off, it's an 8. Instead, I just say, I'm going to play Goreclaw, I'm going to play little creatures to help me play big creatures, and then I'm going to turn them all sideways and do tricksy stuff with green. Or, let's take Queen Marchesa. At her core, she is tribal humans. So, it's a lot of smaller cost creatures that eventually will become more than the sum of their parts. It's a conversation that, quite frankly, I think a game needs. We really need to get away from those pods where people sat down and they had no idea what they're getting themselves into. If somebody sits down with a stacks deck and they're like, oh yeah, this is just like a 7 if I pull everything together, I can tell you from experience that I'm not going to want to play a game with that person again. That's all there is to it. I don't like playing against stacks. I don't like playing stacks. And that's just me. There's a pot out there for that person. They just have to find it. It's the difference between sitting down and losing and being miserable. I've been recording my games this year, and I can tell you right now, I've played a good chunk, and I've only won like 4 games. And I don't really get salty because there's no reason to. I'll lose a game and I'll be like, that was a cool game. Like, you did something sweet. I did something sweet. You were able to stop it, but you did something sweet. And I really want to get away from just the mentality that if you're not playing the most powerful cards, that you're doing it wrong, or that your lower power decks are wrong, or that they aren't in the spirit. And I just want people to be able to play what they want. If somebody likes something, don't rag on them. Just say, that's cool. It might not fit with what I like to do. So you might have to find somebody else that likes to play that way. But don't put them down. It's just common sense. We want more people to play this game because we love this game. We don't want to push people away. And I know this first section isn't going to be super long, but that's all there really is to it. I love this game. I want to play this game with people that love this game the way I love this game. And yes, my style might shift dramatically between some of my decks. But I like to think that when I'm at the table, I'm not just out for my own entertainment. I'm there to do cool stuff that other people are going to look at and be like, you know what? That was sweet. I'm going to stop you. But it was sweet. And I guess I just want to round out this first short section by saying, can we just play a game? Alright, I'm going to hit you with a quick ad, and then we're going to talk some Kaldheim spoilers.
Hi. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you some of the reasons why I started using it. For one, it's free. There's no subscription fee. You don't have to pay for anything. Second, it gives you all of the editing software you need for everything you're going to do. Beyond that, it helps distribute your podcasts to so many different places, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's amazing. Not only that, but they offer to sponsor you. Right there. That's it. Just by recording podcasts, they will pay you based on the number of listens it gets. It brings everything you need into one place. And if you want to try it out, you can download their app, or you can go to anchor.fm to get started. Now back to the episode.
Alright, welcome back. Now, let's jump into some Kaldheim spoilers. And the first one that I want to talk about is actually just a common, but it's Gold Vein Pick. It's 2 mana for an equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+1. Its equip cost is 1, but whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. What that means is if you put it on something with double strike, you're going to make 2 treasures. And I'm here for it because, well, white. I want to put this in a white deck. I want to put it in a couple white decks. Other than that, there's nothing terribly special about it. I just really like the card. Alright, next up on the list of things I want to talk about is Herald, King of Skemfar, which is an uncommon legendary creature for 1, a black and a green. He is an elf warrior, and he is a 3/2 with menace. But when Herald enters the battlefield, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an elf, warrior, or Tavar card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I have an elf deck. I have an elf deck that is Golgari. I have an elf deck that will remain Golgari, and the set is giving me more Golgari elves. I'm probably going to talk about a few more elves. Speaking of elves, the next card isn't actually an elf, but it is a saga that deals with elves. It is Herald Unites the Elves for 2, a black and a green. It's a saga, and what that means is when it enters and after your draw step, you put a counter on it and move to the next step. So when it enters, you mill 3 cards, and you may put an elf or Tavar card from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Then for 2, you put a +1/+1 counter on each elf you control. And then at 3, whenever an elf you control attacks this turn, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And I don't know how familiar you are with elf decks. They tend to have a lot of creatures out. And it's just a good utility card that I plan to throw into elves. And with keeping to our elf theme, that brings us to our next card, the Planeswalker Tyvar Kell, which is 2 and 2 green for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker that says elves you control have tap, add a black. His +1 is put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target elf, untap it, it gains Death Touch till end of turn. His 0 creates a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, and his -6 says you get an emblem with, whenever you cast an elf spell, it gains haste until end of turn, and you draw 2 cards. Which, see, I'm really tempted with this card because I think when it comes down, a lot of times I'm going to want to just make the elf token. But getting that to 6 is going to be that card draw. Well, that's a dilemma for future Andy to figure out. Alright, I don't think I can talk about spoilers here without mentioning the World Tree, which is a land. The World Tree enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to add a green, and as long as you control 6 or more lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. Then it has an activated ability for 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, 2 green, tap it, and sacrifice the World Tree to search your library for any number of God cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. We're going to see a very large uptick in God tribal decks because of this. And I'm scared. But that second ability isn't bad. And that's kind of the reason I want it. But I could be wrong. Who knows? I'm probably wrong. I'm usually quite wrong. And the next card on my list is the big, the bad, the monstrous raider himself, Vorinclex. Which begs the question, how did Vorinclex get here from New Phyrexia? We'll figure that out eventually. But for now, he is a 6/6 Phyrexian Praetor for 4 green. He has Trample and Haste, and if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, you put twice that many counters of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. And if an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half that many of each of those counters on that permanent or player instead, rounded down. Yeah, that's a lot. There's not a whole lot left to say here other than I want it. I need it for the Umori Planeswalker deck. I need it for any +1/+1 counter deck. The set is just looking so magnificent. Alright, we are getting close to the end of the list of stuff that I had written down to talk about. But before we go, we have to talk about Vargoth, the Blood Sky Sire. He is a demon rogue for 2 and a black, and he is a 2/3 with Death Touch. And he has the ability Boast, which is, his boast cost is 1 and a black. And target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. He demonic vampiric tutors when he boasts? Yeah, something like that. It can be used politically. It does say target player. But he's a cheap rogue with Death Touch. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Anawan. Alright, and moving right along next, we have Valki, God of Lies, which is a modal dual-faced card, which on the front is Valki, God of Lies, which is 1 and a black for a 2/1 legendary creature god. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand, and for each opponent, you exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. And for X, you choose a creature card exiled with Valki with converted mana cost X, and Valki becomes a copy of that card. But we mentioned that he's a flip card. So on the other side, he is Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter. For 5 black-red, he is a 5 loyalty planeswalker. And he says, as Tybalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with, you may play cards exiled with Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. He has a +2 that says, exile the top card of each player's library. Then he has a -3 that says, exile target artifact or creature. And he has a -8 that says, exile all cards from all graveyards and add 3 red mana. I mean, it's shenanigans, and it's a new Tybalt, and it's a new awesome Tybalt. It's definitely something that I am going to want to get my hands on. Alright, we have one more card to talk about, and we're going to talk about some lands, and we'll wrap this up. That last card is an artifact. It is the Pyre of Heroes. It's a 2-mana artifact, and you can pay 2 and tap it to sacrifice a creature. Then you search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creatures and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So this gives those vibes that you get from like Birthing Pod, but for a tribal deck specifically, which I am okay with, because in my group I am the tribal guy. I have the most tribal decks. Then again, I have the most decks. And there's I like this design. Alright, now on to the lands. Now, the lands I'm mentioning are the rest of the cycle of the flip lands from Zendikar. And I'm very excited to get the full set. So this is the back channel pathway, which is the tide channel on the other side. And that is green-blue. Then we have the Blight Step pathway and the Seer Step pathway, which is black and red. Then we have the Henge Gate pathway and the Mist Gate pathway. That is white-blue. And then we have Darkboar and Slitherboar pathway, and that is black-green. And again, that's all there's to it. You decide which side you want to play, and it comes in untapped. It's not quite the greatest dual lands, but having the ability to choose, oh, hey, I need a white source, so I'll play this side, or I need a blue source, so I'll play this side. I'm actually a pretty big fan of these, where initially I was not the biggest fan of these. But yeah, that's it. That's my rambling. And I think I'm just gonna bring it to an end there. So, all the normal YouTube stuff here at the end. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing. Hit that like button. Hit the bell for notifications. And I will see you next time. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Mulpey and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at BentzMr, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening, I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.